good. You can probably hear that coming right through
I'm
there.
going to use that in the opening.
That's nice.
Chris, thanks for joining us here on Park Life.
My pleasure entirely, yeah.
Let's go. Hi, I'm Michael Croker, and this is Park Life. I've worked in the Australian theme park industry for a little over 30 years. And in this podcast series, I spend time in conversation with the people inside the business of making memories. Thanks for joining me. I hope you can subscribe, rate, and review. Enjoy the ride. As the show and entertainment creative director with Village Roadshow Theme Parks, Chris Grew has had to be habitually innovative and creative. His love for all things entertainment began instinctively as a young man and lit a fire inside that burns through to today. Our offices are close by, as it turns out, so we made a bit of time to explore his story so far. So what's the current title that you have with Village Roadshow Theme Parks?
Entertainment Group Creative Director.
Can you tell us what does that entail?
Yeah, a lot. It's a pretty broad umbrella. Once you add the word group into your title, because obviously we have quite a few properties, and now we've even branched out internationally to parks in China. So we even get to dabble in some pre-existing parks, and then also I wasn't a part of it, but we've even built parks over there. So if I had to sum it up in a nutshell, my job since I first took on this position has even evolved quite a bit with the popularity of the big signature events we do. So of course I'm still responsible for the quality and consistency of our day-to-day offerings from entertainment, street shows, stadium shows, street performers. So that's what we call day trade. So I'm still responsible for the quality and consistency of those shows. I'm also responsible for a large part of the creative direction with the big signature events, which is your Fright Nights, White Christmas, Carnival, Heroes and Villains. And those events, Spooky Nights as well, which is a recent one, which was really quite a good event. So those events are getting really, really popular. People seem to love to come out at night to one of the parks, could be SeaWorld, Movie World, and have these great experiences. So that's when I talk about my position here is slightly evolving. It's evolving out of necessity to keep up with the demand that the guests have for these big scale events.
Now you have a performer background, and prior to that, even if we go right back to where the journey began in the theme park business, you were initially in what operating division within the business?
So initially I started in the retail division. Then I went on to the operations division. Actually, the first job I got in operations was a performing role, believe it or not. So that's back when we had the Movie Magic studio tour. And
what year are we talking?
Oh, gee whiz, how old was I? I must have been, 19 years old. So I started here in 96, maybe 97, maybe 1998.
Okay, so let's just put that in context for people. So the Movie Magic tour was part of an experience that guests would begin in the theme park at Warner Brothers Movie World, and then it would take them across to the Warner Brothers studio lot on the Gold Coast, which we now know is Village Roadshow Studios.
Yeah.
So that was a terrific, unique experience for guests to get a bit of a taste of movie making. What were you doing in that particular role?
So the cool thing with that was Soundstage 1, which is the smallest soundstage over there on the lot, that housed for some time after the Batman Forever film was made, Joel Schumacher directed. After they finished with the Riddler Lair set, the Jim Carrey's Riddler Lair set, they took that and rebuilt it completely into Soundstage 1. And it was really quite impressive. So what would happen with part of that show is as you were toured around in the trams, they called them, as they toured you around through the studios and through the sound stages in the trams, they would make a stop at Soundstage 1. All the guests would load into the soundstage and they'd literally have a front row seat of the entire set from the Riddler's Lair. And then there'd be a pre-recorded Riddler voiceover with track from the movie, and then a Riddler performer would appear in the blackout darkness and do quite a cool routine up on top of his very high platform that he had from the film. If you ever get the chance to look at the film again, and look at the set, you'll see Jim Carrey had a very elevated throne that would spin on top of a big platform. We'd do a show up on top of that platform. It'd go blackout again. In the blackout, we'd have to slide down a ladder in pitch darkness. And then there was a tiny little hole that you would have to slide on your belly to get through the set to get out back of house. It was wild and exciting and really cool.
And you were playing the Riddler for that?
Yes, played the Riddler. Yeah, it was just the Riddler that appeared in there, and we had a Movie Magic presenter that would set up the scene and say, you're now standing in front of the actual Riddler's lair set from the film. That was really cool. So even though operations, I guess technically they look after all the rides and operation of the rides, this particular gig in operations was really just a performer role.
Yeah. And we're going right back to the early days of Movie World on the Gold Coast. What were you doing, just to jump back another step, before this kid was getting a chance to play this character in the park? What were you doing before the park was known to you in terms of your early employment?
It's funny. I was in year 12, just trying to finish school in 1993, and I had already secured a job at World for Kids. Now, for those that don't know what World for Kids is, it was Coles Myers' attempt to beat Toys R Us, the big American toy store, to beat them out of the country before they even arrived. And they actually made it quite clear to us in training, because I got on board with World for Kids before there was any stores built. And I was part of the fit out for the Southport World for Kids store. These stores were massive, if you remember them.
I do.
Massive. Yeah. The biggest things you've ever seen for a toy store. And I actually was working there before I'd finished school. So as soon as I finished year 12, I rushed to the gate, straight to work, and was fully committed to working at World for Kids. So even after I finished at World for Kids, when I look back at it, you know, it was really quick, because I finished school. Before World for Kids, I was already working in Time Zone. So I've always had these very childlike, I'm not going to say childish, but very childlike positions. I worked in a video game arcade, which was Time Zone. I worked in a toy store, which was fantastic. And then I come to work in a theme park. I've never worked, you know, in a bakery. I've never worked as a mechanic. I've never done any job that wasn't in some way kind of cool and fun. It's cool to work in an arcade. It's cool to work in a toy store. It's super cool to work in a theme park. And that's literally, with the exception of a couple of jobs when I thought I was trying to grow up, which I never did, that's pretty much what I've been doing this whole time. These kind of jobs.
I remember you telling me the story of you, correct me if I'm wrong, you were picking up your brother from work, and he had a job at Movie World.
Yes.
You were picking him up and waiting for him in the car park, is that right?
Yep. So he was working here as a photographer. So we're going back now to 1996. He was working as a photographer, and if you know Movie World's entryway, if you go past the main entryway, there's the security gatehouse where all the staff come and go. And there's just a spot where most people will park their car and wait to pick up staff as they come across the bridge. And I was sitting there facing the security gatehouse in my car, waiting to pick up my brother. He's my older brother from work. And I watched him come across and I watched him walk up to the car. But before he'd arrived, I'd already watched 50 people walk out of security and walk past. And as soon as he got to the car, he sat next to me, and I said to him, "Man, do all these guys know how lucky they are to work here?" And he said to me quite earnestly, "You know what, bro? I don't think they do." And I said, I still remember this verbatim, by the way. I said to him, "I tell you what, if I ever got a job here, I would never take it for granted." And he said, "Do you want to work here?" I said, "Well, yeah, I do." He said, "All right, I'll talk to someone." And sure enough, the next day I get a phone call from the retail supervisor saying, "Hey, would you like to come in tomorrow for an interview?" So what I didn't realise, I was so nervous. Because I was still young. Was I like 17 or 18? I was so nervous, so young. I didn't realise he's obviously gone to them and said, "Hey, you should hire my brother." And they went, "Okay." So I'm all worked up about this interview I'm going to, you know, thinking, "Oh boy, I've got to do a good impression. And oh boy, I hope I get this job because it's Movie World." what I didn't realise, kids kind of know this, is he's given a recommendation and they've gone, sure, if you say he's good, get him in, we'll give him a job. So that's kind of how I got in the door. I got a leg up from my brother, so I'm always grateful for that. And I still have kept my word. I don't take my position or the privilege of working at Movie World, at SeaWorld, at Village Roadshow. I've never taken any of that for granted.
So that kid that starts here jumps into the retail division. What was that job specifically? What were you doing?
Oh, that was tough, man. That was back in the days when they had what was called carts.
Yeah.
Now, carts were big, heavy, wooden... cart, right? So they were big, they were very heavy, they had big wooden, wagon wheels at one end, and then at the other end they had small caster wheels, and you would have two big wooden handles at the end where the casters were, and you would have to spin it and push it, and they were big and heavy, man. We would come in every morning and we'd meet up, and all the boys that were working carts, and we'd go and grab, I need 6 Bugs Bunny dolls, I need 15 Kodak cameras, disposable, I need 10 bottles of sunscreen, and you'd load your cart up, you'd stock it all up, make it all look beautiful, and then you'd wheel it right from in the middle of the park all the way to the front gate archway, down the ramp. You'd have to push it back up the ramp again, and for a skinny little kid that was hard work. And then we would stand there next to your cart. There was no roof on Main Street. You would stand there with your candy stripes on. We used to wear the full-length sleeve candy stripes. Yeah. And then not only that, we would wear around your arm, I don't even know what they're called, those silver rings that go around your arm, and they kind of hold your sleeve around your bicep. So we'd wear those, and they'd trap the heat. And then you'd wear braces over the top of your candy stripes that'd trap all the heat in. And we would sweat profusely out in the sun, but you didn't know any better. You were just grateful to be doing it, because everywhere you looked, it was cool. Yeah. I still remember a day that really was I think a pinnacle moment for me. There was and you have these little pinnacle moments, don't you, where you kind of make a decision yourself and say, hey, I think I'm going to pursue this now. Yeah. And I remember one of those pinnacle moments when I was standing with my cart on Main Street. It was a boiling hot day, so hot in fact that we were going over to the boys on the food and beverage carts that had the big buckets of ice with the Coke in them, and we would grab a scoop of ice and put it inside our hat, and then we'd put our hat on our head. Wow. And then all the ice would melt and go down your back and cool you down, and then 10 minutes later you'd be bone dry again. Your shirt would dry out from the sun, and we just keep doing that all day. Buckets of ice on our head. It was that hot. And then I had Wonder Woman come and stand next to me. Her name was Nadine. She came and stood next to me, and she was obviously a performer from the entertainment team. And I just remember at my age looking over at her, and she was beautiful. She was dressed as a superhero, and I didn't even know what to possibly say to her, but she said hello to me in an American accent. So I instantly believed that there was an American lady standing next to me, beautiful, and she said hello to me. And I could barely even speak. I was that intimidated by not only how she looked, but the fact that she was American, and it was just such a great moment. And that's a moment there that I thought, wow, gee, what a great thing to be doing, what she's doing. I later on saw her later back of house out of her Wonder Woman gear at the canteen, and she spoke to me again. She said, oh, hey, there you are again, in an Australian accent. And I went, what? You're not American? She goes, oh no. And I must look back at myself and realize, oh dude, you were such a kid. You got sucked in by the American accent on the street. And I think sometimes the longer we work here, you do tend to forget those moments where something as simple as speaking to someone on the street in an American accent as a character, they will just believe you. And that is their reality. So that's how critically important it is for us and the guys on the street to maintain that veil. Yeah. Because people just believe. I was like, what, 18, 19 years old, and I believed her.
So how does that kid go from being out there with, putting handfuls of ice under his hat to getting into the entertainment division? What was that process like?
I guess I chipped away at it because this industry is great. This theme park industry is really great because it's just chock full of opportunity everywhere. If you're willing to take a chance, to evolve yourself, to learn and to grow, you can definitely push forward. But you've got to have a good work ethic. If you prove to the people around you you have a good work ethic, I like to think I do have a good work ethic, and that has been part of my success moving forward. Because I know we joke around a lot that I will hustle, and I think I did hustle my way through a few steps simply by, here's an example of hustle. I was working as the Riddler in the Riddler's lair, and there was always two of us on. The other Riddler came on, his name was Mark, and he said, hey, listen, I've got to tell you, I've got great news. I said, yeah, what's up? He's moving to Melbourne, still working for the business, but he's moving to Melbourne. Now, this guy also, he did the Riddler, but he also worked in show and entertainment as Doug Graves in the Maverick show, over in the Maverick Grand Illusion show. And straight away, I don't know why, but I'm glad I did, my brain went straight to, well, that must mean they're going to need someone to replace you over there. Yeah. I'm so glad that my brain went, hey, big fella, here's an opportunity for you. Yeah. So I literally said that to him. Well, I guess that means they're going to need to replace you. And he said, you should call the boss. So I literally picked up the phone in Soundstage 1, called up the boss and said, hey, I know we haven't met. He didn't know me from a can of paint. Wow. I said, I know we haven't met, but is this true? Do you need someone over there? And he says, I don't know, I might. He was very cool about it. And I said, well, I like to put my hat in the ring. And he said, okay, thanks for that. And then hung up the phone. He gave me nothing. Yeah. And then sure enough, maybe an hour, 2 hours later, I got a phone call from my boss saying, I've just advising you, you've got 2 training days at Maverick next week.
Wow.
And it was that simple.
We should mention the Maverick show was a real aspirational thing. It was a key element of the park's show attractions right alongside Police Academy stunt show. So this is a big deal. But just to go back a little bit, again, for people that might be wondering, how did you make that leap? Because so far we haven't heard that you came from a theatrical background, a performance background. You're in retail, you're making your way. As you say, you've got some hustle, you've got some raw talent. That somehow obviously gets you that shot at Riddler. But getting into the Maverick thing is no small feat, because that's where the stakes are a bit higher. How are you doing that without the formal training behind you? What's driving that?
You're right, and I'll be honest, I have no formal training.
I think that's an interesting thing, right? Because that's a part of the motivational aspect of your story. You're driven by the idea of what might be possible, and then discovering when you get to it, this is in me. Now, how do I capitalize on it?
Yeah, I think backing yourself can take you a long way.
Where does that come from for you?
Because
that's kind of the key thing for me. Where does that sense of fearlessness about what you could possibly do come from?
I don't know. I kind of back myself in things that I know I've got a half decent shot at. And I know what I'm good at. And I've always been good at copying people's voices and mimicking people's behaviour. That goes right back to primary school for me. I would always want to be on the debating team. I would always love the chance to do what do we call them in school, an oral presentation.
Yeah.
Right. I would never balk at that because I kind of liked the sound of my own voice. I thought I had a good sounding voice, and I didn't seem to get too worried to stand up in front of all of my classmates and peers and have to present or have to act or have to put on a little show. Though I had no formal training, that kind of stuff never really bothered me, and I couldn't understand how it could bother someone. Does that make sense? Yeah. When someone says, oh no, I could never do that, I'm terrified. I'm too terrified to get up in front of that, but I will go and ride a horse at a full gallop. I said, wow, that's interesting. I'm terrified of even walking near a horse, but getting up in front of people for me is no problem. So I've always struggled with people's fear of getting up, though I do recognise and understand that it is a legitimate fear that I never really felt.
So it's in your DNA.
I guess so.
Yeah.
And the fact that I took every opportunity to get up and have a crack was me practicing, though I wasn't officially learning. I was
We should explain, if anyone's listening,
craft.
if anyone's listening who's not in Australia, we should maybe explain when you say, I'm going to give this a crack.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it's like I said before, you back yourself, right?
You're giving yourself a shot.
Yeah, you give yourself a shot at something, believe in your own ability.
Yeah.
And like I said before, I thought my ability was sound. So because I had self-belief in my ability to speak in front of people, to put on a character accent, I was very good at doing voices, by the way.
Did you seek out mentorship? Did you seek out advice when you were, let's say you're now in the Maverick production? I imagine you were surrounded by stuntmen and women and actors. And what was that experience like?
It was really good and actually really quite nurturing. There were cast in there in that production that were senior to me in years. Not only had they been with the company longer, but they were also just older people. Also theatre people and also stunt people. So
and former television as well?
Television, like A-list Australian television stars.
Yeah.
There was very accomplished theatre people, NIDA graduates. It was a really great mixed bag of really talented people, but very nurturing. Though I don't think because I was full of self-bravado and thought I was much better than I actually was. So I probably thought I was better, right?
The advantage of youth.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I thought I was much better than I actually was.
Yeah.
So because of that, I think that my castmates felt they could take me under their wing and just give me a little guidance, whether I liked it or not.
What did you learn in that period? Because obviously you're getting your 10,000 hours up, right? Because you're doing multiple shows, back to back, 5-6 days a week. So you're going to be learning in an accelerated fashion. What were some of the things that you took away?
Some of the big things that they tried to get across to me, and I remember them first before anything else. You're not the only one on stage, because obviously I thought I was fantastic. So I thought whenever I'm on stage, I should try and steal the show. I was part of an ensemble. I'm not the only one out there. They also, because I guess I'm a bit of a, what's the best word I'm looking for here? I like to have a laugh. And I like to be silly, and I like to encourage other people to laugh. But there's a time and a place for that. I learned what an in-joke was very quickly, and that there's no real place for them in a stage production. Because if you and your castmates are the only one laughing, there's really no purpose for that joke being in the show. I also learned that we are there for the audience, not for ourselves, and that lends to the in-joke scenario. But, I mean, apart from learning very broad rules of theatre, because that was kind of like a live theatre production that we were doing.
Sure.
It was all inside, controlled lighting, and a really great venue. I learnt a lot, but beyond that, I learnt...
You're honing your craft.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it was... All of those castmates were almost my teachers and professors, and they were just taking every day to teach me more, because the better I was, the easier it was for them.
Yeah, interesting.
And if I was not great and making every day challenging for them, they just want to be able to come to work, do the best show they can, and go home with a little bit of gas left in the tank. But if you've got a young guy on set with you that's sucking all the air out of the room, taking up all the room on stage every show, that just makes your day harder, right? So I guess there was a means to an end for them. They would invest the time in training me, teaching me, molding me, and mentoring me, even though I didn't particularly ask for it. They just felt it was needed to be done, so they did it, and I'm really grateful that they did, because it's learning by absorption. They will just keep putting it on you, and you will absorb all of those teachings until you start doing it to the younger generation yourself.
So you're falling in love with the craft more and more, and you're honing your skills. What's the transition out of Maverick? Where do you go from there?
So Maverick, so the two major shows at the time was the Maverick Grand Illusion Show, and then of course the big one, the Police Academy Stunt Show.
We should just put that in time too, because really there was no other show like that anywhere else in the country at the time that had as much ambition and scale of stunt action on a live basis every day. Very character-driven show. There was really nothing else like it in the country. So to be a part of that seems like a big leap. Did you comfortably make that transition? What was that like?
No, not at all. Not at all. It wasn't comfortable at all. It was, for me, I felt it was very hard. There was a definite prestige about the Police Academy show. There was a different prestige about the Maverick show. So even though I was a Maverick cast member, that really meant nothing once you go over to the completely separate camp, which was the Police Academy camp.
It's its own kind of animal.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So now you're
completely separate.
You're learning how to interact and assimilate with groups.
Yeah, so they were very different people too. When you look at a cast, you know, you had the Maverick cast, you had actual cowboys. Some of those guys were cowboys. Wow. Rodeo rider, three of them actually were rodeo riders.
Wow.
Champion rodeo riders. They ride bulls, they ride horses. Because some of those guys had come from the previous show, which I was never a part of, which was the Western Action Stunt Show.
Right.
That was when it was an outdoor venue. So they carried on and then became cast members of Maverick. Now, that was just a different breed. They were cowboys. Some of them were real theatre actors, trained theatre, very seasoned theatre actors. Then you move over to the Police Academy camp. Wonderful people for a completely different reason and in a completely different skill set. These guys were all practicing stunt people. Mm-hmm. Movie stunt people, all of them, every single one.
They're all active in the industry while they're doing this in the park.
Every single one of them. Yeah. They all work on movies. They're all fit, strong, capable, proper stunt people. And then I come in because there was an acting role, actually two acting roles in the show, which was Captain Harris. He was the cranky guy that comes out at the start and yells at the crowd and picks out a few people. Then there's Commandant Lassard, which I also went on to play Commandant Lassard eventually. I was still young. I was, in my early 20s. And I'm playing, a 60-year-old man. So I'd have to put all makeup on to make me look like Commandant Lassard. But I'm so glad I got to do that.
Could you give us a little bit of Lassard? Just a little bit.
Oh, yes, of course I can. Oh, just because this is Sunday doesn't mean you can be late for roll call. Oh, where's the flag for the morning ceremony?
Brilliant.
So, yeah, I felt, you know, it's funny. They approached me, the director of the show approached me and said, how would you feel about, because I would do Captain Harris, no problem. I'd do that. Sometimes I do that 5 days a week.
Wow.
And that was a really taxing role because it was a lot of barking, loud at the audience, really loud. And by the end of the day, sometimes you have zero voice left, but you have to bounce back the next day and do it again. But Commandant Lassard, totally different role, but super cool. I mean, you were down there, instead of being up on the gangway, you were down on the set. In the action.
Cars and
hanging
bikes.
out of a toilet that's getting lifted up by a crane and, you know, really doing really cool stuff. So a very different cast. It was hard for me because I thought I was, again, overconfident in my own abilities, thought I was fantastic. Came into this new set with these really capable people and a very established friend group. And I found it hard to gel in with that group. It eventually happened, but it's something that I had to work at and eat a lot of humble pie. And just realise, I guess, I'm the new kid.
Yeah, and I guess that's sometimes the toughest thing to learn in the entertainment or the arts, and I guess maybe in any business, and as part of your growth, is learning humility. And there's no real learning unless there's humility, because it's hard to learn if you're not bringing humility into your own ego and being open to learning. So it sometimes can be a painful one. But how long did you spend in police academy in those roles?
I'm really terrible with dates, but I came and went. I did a couple of years, and then I went over to SeaWorld for a couple of years and did show announcing, which was great. But then I came back again and did another couple of years in that cast. So
Can we just...
I bounced around a bit.
Let's just go back a little bit in that space, because I think that's one of the rare things about particularly working inside the Village Roadshow theme park business. It's no small thing to be able to say, you know, I've kicked off in retail, I've made my way into show and entertainment, or through operations into show and entertainment. I've moved up the rank of these shows, and now I'm taking these skills that I've learnt and I'm going to a completely different business unit, doing completely different on-mic work, which is now all about, on most occasions, just you in front of a stadium filled with people. And it might be a dolphin presentation, it might be a sea lion presentation, or a water ski show. Different groups of people in each of those three elements. Got to get on with all of them and assimilate. Not an easy thing to do. In a completely different park. That's no small achievement. So how does that kid now get to a point where he can comfortably take those skills and move into a park like SeaWorld? What was that process like for you?
Again, hard. And I had to really take a step back from myself and realise that what I thought I knew didn't really count for much.
Right. In that space.
In that environment, yeah. I thought I was... and here's what I've learnt now that I know what I know. I had been over here doing everything's fully scripted. You have a script, you don't deviate from the script. I got good at doing scripted shows. However, SeaWorld is a completely different skill set. Show announcing at SeaWorld is working with 2 live animal shows and a live water ski stunt show, all 3 of which there is no guaranteed outcomes.
No.
Now, that's where, as you know, the ad-lib comes into play, which I really was not practiced at. In fact, I had no opportunity. Back in those days, Movie World was a very rigid, scripted, guaranteed result park.
Let's talk about that, because I remember you telling me the story. You're at SeaWorld, you've got this job as an announcer, you're in one of the sound studios watching one of the other guys do a show,
Yeah.
knowing that, okay, I'm learning to do this thing. And can you pick up on that conversation where I think you'd said something to someone in that room?
Yeah, I can't remember who the audio operator was, but I sure as heck remember who the announcer was. His name was Brian. He was an ex-BBC radio announcer.
Wow.
He had an amazing timbre to his voice, and he was razor sharp with his skills and delivery of his skill set. Now, he was on stage at the ski show delivering at the time it was the Ski Challenge show, which is the Red Devils versus the Blue Thunder. Now, he was down there introducing 2 of the skiers. They'd come up, they'd ski up onto the stage, they'd stand next to either side of the announcer. The announcer would say, "Hey, to my left over here from the Blue Thunder, it's Michael Croker. Hey, Michael, why don't you tell me about what you're going to do for these guys today?" Now, he was introducing these guys, and I remember the way he was introducing them was just impressive. I'd never heard something like that before. I was watching this with, all right, I got to watch this to get an understanding of what I have to do. But it did the opposite. It almost scared me out the door. I watched him and I said to the the audio technician next to me, he was so good. And I said, "Oh man, I don't think I can do this." And the audio tech said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "What he's doing down there, I don't think I can do that. I think I'm out of my depth here, man. Honestly, I don't think I can. I don't think I'm right for this job." And he said, "Oh, relax." He said, "Yeah, you can't do it now, but you will be able to do it. Trust me." He said, "Trust me, you will be able to do this. Don't stress." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll take your word for it, but I'm not feeling great right now." As if I'm actually probably ready to say, "Thank you for the opportunity, but I don't think this is for me." That's how scared off I was.
Right.
Just by his ability.
How do you then decide, I am going to get on stage and I am going to walk down there and do this? What was that experience like for you? And what was the benefit then of having done it?
I'll tell you what when the penny dropped for me was when they made me go on stage and feel the space.
Right.
And I realised, oh, it's not so bad down here on stage. This feels okay without an audience there. And I do that still to this day. As soon as I get the opportunity to put a new person on stage to feel the space and realise it's not that scary. This is what the stage feels like. This is how big it is. This is what you can see. That's one big obstacle to get over. Once I got on stage eventually and got comfortable to be on those kinds of stages, because every stage is different, you get that out of your system, right? Then you just have to worry about, now what am I going to do if there's actually people here? That was a different story because my nerves ate me up on my first few shows. It just tightened every muscle in my body and made it really hard to breathe, really hard to get my words out clean without a quiver in my voice. But I persisted and pushed through. I got some little wins by doing some shows, and after the show someone would pat me on the back and say, "Hey man, that was good. You did good." And I'd say, "Oh really?" And they went, "Yeah, that was actually a really good show." And that's all you need sometimes, that little bit of validation from someone that is in it with you to say, okay, well then maybe I can do this. Those little wins and the little comforts along the way of feeling the stage, having the view of the audience, making an honest connection and looking in the eyes of someone in the audience and realizing, oh, okay, they're nodding along with what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is working. People are laughing when I tell a joke. They're laughing.
And connecting, yeah.
People are clapping when I ask them to clap.
Yeah.
This is not as bad as I thought it would be. In fact, I think I'm now doing what Brian was doing. So in the early days of doing that show announcing, yes, it was very clunky. And I would put on my stupid show announcer voice because I didn't know any better. Yeah. Until you finally relax.
And find your own voice.
And find your own voice and stop trying to be a show announcer and talking like that. Hi everyone, welcome to SeaWorld. So once you get rid of that and start honestly connecting with people, yeah, you get a lot more comfortable. So much so that nowadays it's really quite rare for me to get nervous before any public speaking engagement. Yeah. I've had to introduce famous people and get up. It doesn't matter what size. It could be 100,000 people in a stadium. It really doesn't make a difference anymore because we've had all of those great hours of learning opportunities in front of big crowds, small crowds as well, intimate crowds. That's a whole nother challenge.
It's that when you get to that point where you've done your hours, you've learnt your craft, and you're continuing to learn and refine it all the time, but you get to a point where you've got the base fundamentals down, then you can forget them. They won't leave you, but when you forget them, your authentic self can sit there and come through, and all that learning is still in there informing your choices and your process. Yeah. And sometimes the hardest thing for a lot of performers to do is just to trust that they're enough.
Yeah. And
their own voice is enough, rather than having to project something that might be a little less authentic. How long did you spend doing this particular gig?
Show announcing for a few years. It was really honestly some of the best years of my working life, show announcing at SeaWorld. Just the rich array of experiences you get to have in an animal park or a park that has animals in it. I look back just with the best memories of my time there, and the people and the marine mammal trainers that you get to work with, and all the different announcers that I work with there. So we're only talking a few years that I did it, but in those few years, gee, the learning curve is steep.
Yeah.
And when you say you keep learning because you keep looking at other people's performances, and I'll say the word stealing. You'll steal things from their performance because you go, wow, they do it much better than me.
Yeah.
I might start doing it a bit more like that. And every time you get another announcer in, you'll look at the way their take on it and go, oh, that's better than mine.
Yeah.
So you just never stop looking for improvements and taking better pieces. And it's all really nice and validating when you go and watch a show later and you see someone doing something that you go, that's mine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'll try and tell a joke on stage. You go, I'm the one that first said that joke. That joke's not even in the script.
Did you have a picture in your head at any point along this path of where you'd want to be? Because now you're in a role where you've got this group responsibility, which we talked about at the start.
Yep.
You've got eyes across multiple sites, including eyes across businesses that we are collaborating with in China. And there's a big burden of responsibility there with the special signature events each year and the conceptualization of content and then the delivery of it. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
Did you set out at any point here with a picture in your mind of where this would ultimately take you? I'm sure people would wonder, how did you still end up where you are?
Yeah, I did. I mean, if you remember back, we sat in this room and had conversations about what's my 5-year plan. You're the one that actually brought me in and sat me down and said, okay, I see that you're doing great stuff out there, and I see that you're putting...
That's why I was leading this question, mate, because I was hoping you might start bringing me into the story.
Actually,
I haven't heard a single thing yet.
At what point did I help you?
At what point do I get involved in this?
Well, you were there at some stage. It's really quite hazy when it happened.
Yeah.
But no, I remember I was become what you would call a senior cast member, which means I'd been here probably one of the longest out of everyone, and then I'd start to put my hands up for a few little jobs like, hey, we're doing this event Halloween at Movie World, and wondering if you might like to take the reins on making a little scare zone or maze in the middle of the park. So sure, I'll do that. And then you brought me into the office and you said, what's your plan? What's your 5-year plan? I see you're out there. I see you on the street. You do great work. People say, I hear great things about what you do. So where do you want to go? What's your plan? And I remember saying to you, well, I'd love to do your job one day. And he said,
I said, get the hell out of my office.
No, you actually said, be careful what you wish for. So you said, all right, so what about my job is it that you like? And I said, I naturally like to move into a position of influence, even among the cast. To, when there's a decision to be made in the cast, I would try and steer it in whatever direction. So I felt in myself the tendency to want to lead. So I thought for me a natural progression would be, I would love to maybe be a supervisor one day and supervise the entertainment team. Now that didn't happen quickly. I thought that would be as easy as coming and speaking to you and saying, I want to be a supervisor. Can I be a supervisor next month?
Because up until that point, that had been working for you. Hey, here there's a gig happening at Maverick. I'll just talk to the manager.
That's it. I'll just let them know, and then next week
I'll have something.
I'll have something.
Yeah.
So that definitely did not happen quickly. And I'm glad it didn't, because it gave me, even though I put myself on the radar with you and said, well, I kind of want to do that. So next time there's an opportunity that comes up, I'd like to put my hand up for it. You didn't give me that so much, but you gave me plenty of other opportunities to cut my teeth just enough. Okay, well, you don't need to lead, 200 staff, but how about we start with you can be in charge of these 20 staff? So we'd start to do those jobs. They were Friday nights jobs and things like that. And we'd take on a small responsibilities. But what we called in those days, I think we called it project work. Even to a point where I think I had an interview, a meeting over at HR with the, hey, where do you see yourself going in 5 years? And I think you even set it up for me and said, why don't you go and speak to them? And
did you at any point want to say to someone, please stop asking me that question?
Yeah, please just do it.
Please stop asking about 5 years.
Stop asking me where do I want to go and start putting me somewhere.
Stop putting me somewhere.
Just put me in something. So I went to HR and had that chat, and they said, it seems to us that you're a very good project person. And you're good at doing a project that has an end date, and then at the end of that, you can go back to doing what you were doing. I thought that was a very polite way of saying, we don't see you in a permanent role. I was a bit disappointed by that comment, to think, oh, is that the way you see me? That I'm good for a small duration of time. I can manage a small project, but then I really do need to go back to what I was doing.
You think you were overthinking that?
That's just the way I felt at the time.
Yeah, right.
I probably was overthinking it. But I remember that was the...
Wasn't enough for you.
No, because I thought, because I thought that's the way I was seen, as someone that's capable of doing a small job, but it has to have an end date on it.
Yeah.
I said, well, I don't want that. I want to permanently move up and start having a permanent influence across things. Yeah. That eventually happened. So true to your word, when there was an opportunity that came up that you thought I was appropriate for, that happened, right? But it certainly wasn't until you'd given me multiple opportunities to learn a whole new skill set again. So, we've gone out, we've done stage shows, now we've done announcing, we've done character work on the street, I've operated rides, I've done all of that kind of stuff. But I've led small teams for project work, but I certainly hadn't gone, okay, now you've got 200 staff and a whole new set of responsibilities. I remember you said to me, be careful what you wish for.
I think a lot of that is too, being aware that you don't want to race toward the finish line prematurely if you haven't been putting the work in to lead you there and get you there with the best possible amount of prep. I remember being at SeaWorld managing a team of 4, which sounds a little silly. There was a very small team of show announcers, and then within 5 years it was a team of 40, and then a few years later that number was bigger again. But I remember in hindsight, looking back, being grateful that I had the grounding of just those 4 people under my charge, and the learnings you make there at a micro level, and then all those learnings compound onto each other, and you are getting more prepared than you realise. Sometimes you don't know you're doing the learning while you're getting it, So you ultimately find your way, and you take the post of creative director for the show and entertainment division. That immediately puts you into the burden of responsibility around everything we've been talking about so far. What's excited you the most about that role over the last few years, and when you look back at the trajectory of your career and what's been achieved between now and then, what brings you the most joy and still excites you?
I really get a kick out of looking forwards. I'm not the kind of guy that reminisces on the past very much. I've got to be honest with you. I'm not super romantic in that sense. I know a lot of people around me will look at things that have been achieved in the theme park industry in the past and think, boy, the glory days. I'm not thinking about the glory days. I'm not thinking about what we used to do. I'm just excited, looking forward to the possibilities in the future. And the fact that this business is so dynamic and has got such a forward-thinking, is such a forward-thinking business in the sense that we're not holding position ever. Even in the time I've been in this position, the business hasn't stopped still for a second. It's pushing forward and so ambitious. That's what excites me, the future, and to be able to have any amount of influence on any component of how the business progresses forwards, whether it be with, a whole new studio showcase, permanent exhibit, maybe a whole new tour through the Village Roadshow Studios. Maybe the Village Roadshow Studios expand, and that can influence the park as well. We get new attractions in the park. We get new shows, new show venues. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me hungry, because it's always on the horizon. I can honestly say there's never been a moment in the time I've been even a supervisor here where I felt the business wasn't going anywhere.
I can remember a moment where I realised that you were absolutely the right person at the right time, in the right moment in the story of the park's journey. And we were preparing Fright Nights, and I remember you calling a meeting with me, and we were about 12 months out, and you put the idea to me that, we're always very traditionally basing ourselves in the cinematic universes of horror, and we're playing in that space. Are you aware, Michael, just how compelling the world of gaming is from a horror perspective as a genre? And no one yet is tapping into that for a immersive, real-world horror experience. And I have an idea, and that became the Evil Within,
Yeah.
and working with Bethesda as a game developer, that broke new ground.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And I remember sitting there thinking, you know what, that's completely out of the box, and for that reason alone is worth exploring. And it became one of the most popular mazes we've done. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Because you mentioned before about the business surging forward and continuing to innovate. That's a prime example of you actually lighting the fire on an innovation.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that, actually. You know, I'm still in contact with the Bethesda team. We're actually really good friends now. That was a really well-timed and well-handled joint relationship between VRTP and Bethesda. So that, again, was a hustle, to be honest. It was a matter of me doing a internet search on what horror games are coming out this year on Xbox, PlayStation, PC, whatever. And then I see this one called The Evil Within, due to come out in October. Went, oh, that's perfect. Our event's in October. Surely we could pony up and cross-market that, you know. So then the hard part started. So I went, okay, so right, who's making The Evil Within? Distributor is Bethesda Soft. So I went, okay, Bethesda Soft. And I went, where do I know that name from? They happen to be the producers of my favourite game of all time, which is the Fallout series. So I went, oh, of course, that's where I know Bethesda from. So then I go, Bethesda Australia. Surely there's a Bethesda Australia office. Long story short, I found it. They have an office in Manly in Sydney. I cold called them out of the blue. I got onto their publicity manager. It was hard. I had to keep calling until I actually connected to someone. I got a hold of her. I said, hey, at this time I wasn't even a supervisor. I was just making the mazes. And then I'd be Austin Powers for the day. And I'd have a break and I'd come into the office. I'll call Sydney. And then I've got to go because I've got to be out on the street again and do Austin Powers for another half an hour. So I rang her up and she said, well, you know what? That kind of sounds cool. Would you like to come to Sydney and maybe we'll have a chat about it? So I really quickly put together with another man named Derek, who's a 3D artist. We smashed together a maze design based off just the trailer for the game. We flew to Sydney, the two of us. We met with them. They took us for pizza and a beer. We showed them on the iPad, this is what your maze would look like. It blew them away. And they said, done, we're on board. And that's how, I won't say easy, but that was the process of that. It was hard just to connect with them because I was cold calling a computer game company. Now, to give you an idea of how big this company is, Bethesda Soft, they've got an office, of course, in Sydney. They've got offices all over the world, London, Japan, Washington, of course, Bethesda, Washington, of course. Now, they've just sold to Microsoft. Bethesda's just been bought out by Microsoft. $90 billion Microsoft paid for Bethesda.
Crazy.
And Bethesda is still considered a boutique gaming company.
Yeah.
So that's great. We're still good friends and the door is always open between our two businesses now. So I'm really proud of that. That's something that we got happening. And no one else was doing that. And I don't think anyone else has done anything like that.
Yeah, big hit with our fan base as well. And that's been the challenge in your role too, is that every year we have to effectively burn down the creative and then rebuild and repurpose and rethink what these events will look and feel like for the guests so that it's compelling year on year. That's where it's exciting, and at the same time it can be a little bit anxious as well, right?
Yeah, it's always exciting because we always get to play in a new sandbox, right? However, it's a lot of work and our fan base is very demanding, as well they should be, right? But as rewarding as it is to be able to make new stuff all the time, I mean, we just don't get to stop. We are, what do we get to, August, September, and people start to come up to us in the park and say, hey, you guys will be thinking about Fright Night soon, right? Thinking about Fright Nights. We've been doing it since November last year.
And I think that's the thing I said to someone recently. We're either in pre-production, in production, or post-production debriefing at any one point in the year. There is never a point in the year where there is nothing happening. When you look back, and we've covered the evil within, but is there a single moment that stands out as one of the proudest moments for you so far?
I was really proud. Actually, yeah, there is a single moment. I was really proud. It was the same year that we did Evil Within. We also did Wolf Creek 2, the maze with John Jarrett. And to hear an actor the likes of John Jarrett stand up and address the media call, which was a great event, by the way, when they opened up those two mazes for that Fright Nights. To hear John Jarrett look over to me and say, hey, I just want to say a big thank you and congratulations to Chris Grew, the guy he's the guy, by the way, that's put all of this together.
Yeah.
Oh, my heart burst.
Yeah.
I thought, man, that's an idol of mine up there. He knows me. You know when you get those moments, he knows my name.
Yeah.
That was one of those moments. Hey, he knows my name. Yeah, that made me really proud to hear John Jarrett say my name.
That's probably a good full circle moment to begin to wrap up, because there's the kid and the man that was working in the toy shop and was... what were you doing outside of the toy shop? We had the toy shop.
Yeah, I had the arcade, Time Zone,
Time Zone,
games arcade.
And you're obviously a pop culture fan, and and here you are with a pop culture icon of Australian modern cinema saying, hey, congrats, this is a really good job. That's a bit of a full circle right there.
Yeah, totally. The boy's never left the man, though.
And he can't.
No, I don't think in this job I can, right?
No.
I think the day that happens, I won't be as effective.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, you're right. That was a boyish moment for me, and I think that hopefully I'll continue to have boyish moments as long as I live.
Before you let us go and move on, you mentioned before that it wasn't uncommon for you to be out in the park racing about doing a bunch of different characters on any given day, and you're obviously renowned for your Austin powers. Would you give us a little touch?
I don't know, baby. Depends on if you've been naughty. Okay, all right, moving on, baby.
Mate, congratulations on the career so far. It's been terrific to have you on and go a bit deeper into your life journey. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed this latest episode. You'll find Park Life on Twitter and me, Michael Croker, on Instagram at Mike_Croker. See you next time.